What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Rokai's Raid Guides, where today we are going over the third boss in Siege of Orgrimmar, Norushen. Now, before getting to the boss stuff, of course, a couple of quick things for you, and we'll get into it right after. I'm going to assume you've watched the first two guides, so I'm going to hit you with a really quick bullet-pointed version. First of all, join the Discord, link in the description below. Awesome 10-man gamers in there helping one another out. Number two, written guides now live on the website, linked down below. Example on screen for you now. Lots of cool stuff for bosses that don't have video guides done. Written guides are here. We're working on this every single day, so if you notice issues, please report them in Discord. We'll get them updated as quickly as possible. And last but certainly not least, head over to Twitch, give me a follow over there, but I'll be streaming both the race itself on Twitch and on YouTube. Like, subscribe, follow, all the things helps me a ton. It's been really fun building this 10-man community. And with that out of the way, let's get right into it. Norushen is a one-phase fight with some interesting role-specific mini-games to do throughout the fight. It also ramps in damage the later into the fight you get, the more healing output that's required from your healers. But overall, very simple conceptually, just requires a little bit of organization and some good DPS. The DPS check can be quite real if you make mistakes throughout the fight, so just be aware of that. But the mechanics themselves are pretty straightforward. The main thing that you have to pay attention to kind of passively throughout the entire fight is everyone's corruption levels. So everybody in the raid starts at 75 corruption on pull. The higher your corruption levels, up to a cap of 100, the less damage you deal to the boss. So the mini games or these trials that you do throughout the fight are in an effort to reduce the total amount of corruption you have. When you're at 0 corruption, you do the full intended amount of damage to the amalgam or the main boss. Now, the other thing about corruption is it only reduces damage to the amalgam of corruption or the main boss you see in the center of the room. It does not have any effect on the smaller adds you see throughout the room. As far as specific mechanics go, I'm going to start with the ones that happen like in this main phase, we'll call it the upstairs phase, that are persistent throughout the whole fight first. Then we'll talk about what happens downstairs for the role-specific challenges afterwards. We'll kick this thing off with some tank mechanics, since I usually forget you guys and put you last. So tanks, you have one main thing to worry about from the amalgam himself, which is Unleashed Anger. It's a physical damage hit, about 500k HP, and then it stacks in damage per application. So after each Unleashed Anger, you get a debuff, and each stack of that debuff increases the damage of the next Unleashed Anger by 50%. So you'll want to taunt swap around 3 or 4 stacks of this, or go to 100 and maximize Vengeance. I don't know, you guys play a totally different game than we do, but use probably a defensive or something for that. The key to handling the taunt swap is that typically you're only going to have one tank upstairs in the main phase at a time, and the other tank is going to be downstairs doing one of their trials or one of their challenges. So the real determining factor on the taunt swap is basically, hey, when does my off tank come back upstairs? Cool, they're back, taunt swap, and then the main tank at that time then does their challenge, and you guys rinse and repeat that throughout the entire fight. So just pay attention. You never want to go downstairs or try to do a taunt swap if your other tank is currently not in the same realm as you. Next up is a mechanic for everybody, Blind Hatred. It's a giant laser beam that very slowly spins throughout about 75% of the room. So the beam will spawn in a random direction, and then you'll see him channel it, and then slowly start to move either clockwise or counterclockwise. It can go either way. A nice thing about this beam is that based on where it spawns, you can go just roughly to the left or right of where it started, and it will never make it all the way to you because it doesn't fully complete the circle. So very, very easy to dodge. You can just run through the boss to near its start point and be completely safe. If you get hit by this, it will one-shot you. And the final mechanic from the amalgam is called Icy Fear. This is unavoidable frost damage dealt to everybody in the raid. It starts off at just 100k damage every 3 seconds, so just pretty small rot damage. However, starting at 40% and then for the rest of the fight, the lower HP that the amalgam gets, the more damage each tick of that Icy Fear does. So it acts as like a soft enrage the further into the fight you get as the boss gets lower health, and for that reason you will lust at the end of the fight. The amalgam itself doesn't have any other mechanics. The majority of the other mechanics actually come from these ads you see on the screen right now. So there's both large and small ads. The small ads only do one thing, which is cast a corruption bolt that travels towards the large amalgam, or the main boss that you're hitting the majority of the time. Each bolt that reaches the boss increases the amount of damage that the boss does for 20 seconds at 8% per stack. So basically, bolts hitting boss equals bad. You've got two options as far as handling this. Either one, interrupts, which in 10-man is actually very difficult just because of how many of them spawn. They are CCable though, so stuns and stuff like that work. Or you can actually intercept the bolts by standing between the small ad and the boss. The bolt will instead hit you and prevent that damage application from reaching the boss. Ultimately, they're kind of a non-issue. They die extremely fast. I would just set up some type of AoE CC, get interrupts when you can, but wouldn't stress too much about this. And then the other ad, or the large ad, spawns in two different ways. The first way that it can spawn is anytime that a DPS player completes their trial, or that mini game that they do downstairs. Once they finish that, that triggers one of the large ads to spawn. And then the only other way that a large ad spawns is once you reach 50% on the main boss's HP, and then every 10% after that, the boss will automatically spawn an ad. So at 50, 40, 30, 20, and 10, in the second half of the fight, the boss will spawn one large ad. The large ad itself does effectively nothing, but it is your number one priority when it spawns. You want to kill it as quickly as possible because you never want two up at the same time. The reason for this is that on death is when you actually care about this ad. So you'll see here as this big ad dies, and it's very hard to see, but a super small Shaw orb spawns that has to be soaked. Because any time that that orb goes unsoaked, it pulses raid-wide damage every second that the orb remains on the ground. So what you actually want to do is place somebody inside of that ad to pick up the orb the second that ad dies. This does come with a downside though. Soaking that orb, though it prevents the raid-wide damage, does give whichever player picked it up 25 corruption. So in the strategy section, we'll talk more about that, but it's just important to know picking up the orb equals 25 corruption for that player. That covers all of our boss and ad mechanics, so now we'll go into each of the trial phases. So like I mentioned before, each role type has its own unique challenge. It's going to be a tank challenge, a healer-specific challenge, and then a DPS-specific challenge. So we'll kick it off with the DPS challenge. For any player, not just DPS, to actually start your challenge, you have to right-click on any of those golden orbs you see around the room. So click on the orb, and then for the DPS challenge specifically, there are 4 ads. 3 small ads and 1 large ad. The large ad will just run at you and cast a giant frontal that you need to dodge. And then these small ads just have like a spell reflect type shield that allows them to only be hit from behind. So you can see they move a little bit and every once in a while will recast this shield. They just can't be attacked from the direction that shield is facing, so you have to constantly run behind them. However, the phase itself is very simple and not too scary. As soon as all 4 of those ads are dead, your trial is complete. It will port you back upstairs and will give you that buff that gets rid of any of the damage reduction penalty from your corruption and puts you at 0 corruption as well. The healer challenge has a little bit more going on. So it'll spawn you downstairs. You'll have 1 corrupted ad that you need to kill. Once that ad dies is when your trial ends and you will have successfully completed it. It also spawns you in with 3 NPC friends that are going to help you kill this corrupted ad. 3 things you have to pay attention to. 1, this giant smoke bomb that you see on the floor does damage to everybody standing inside it. 2 is a dispellable debuff that after 10 seconds when it expires deals 500k damage to the target. You will need to dispel that. And the 3rd is Disheartening Laugh. It's a dot that is not dispellable, just deals shadow damage to everybody in that trial room over 6 seconds. So it's the main thing that could potentially kill somebody. So again, you have to both kill your ad and keep your NPC friends alive. Successfully completing the challenge as a healer gives you the Purified buff, removing all corruption, and then also gives you bonus healing. So you very much want all of your healers to do this because that throughput is going to be needed by the end of the fight with that Soften Rage. And last up is the tank challenge or the tank trial. Tanks, just a brief side note to you, you guys are going to be doing this very frequently just because of the nature of the fight. So you're going to want to get very good at this. In order to complete your trial successfully, you need to kill your ad before it kills you, and all of its mechanics are basically some type of one-shot mechanic. So you've got a frontal, does 1.5 million damage if not dodged. You have Hurl Corruption, which is like a single target bolt, also does 1 million damage. You'll need mitigation for that. Burst of Corruption, unavoidable, does about 500k damage. You'll need mitigation for that. And then Piercing Corruption does 800k physical damage, but it cannot be absorbed. So that one's important as well. And then the final, more passive thing that you can't do anything about but should be aware of, it's called Corruption. Basically, every time you get hit by a melee from your ad, it puts a dot on you that does 25k shadow damage per second, but it also stacks. So the more times you get meleeed, the more that dot does. That wraps up both the mechanics section and the trials for every single role. So let's talk strategy. The first thing that you'll want pre-assigned before you even pull the boss for the first time is an order that your DPS players are going to go down and do their trial in. In 10-man, I recommend only having one person complete their trial at a time. That way you never have an excessive amount of ads that you have to deal with upstairs. So if you look in the top left of the screen, we just had an MRT note, the order in which people were going. And then as soon as the big ad died upstairs and that Shaw orb got soaked up, the next DPS player would click on the orb and go down. Repeat that until all 6 DPS are done. You want to do it just as quickly as possible so that you do the full amount of damage to the boss as soon as you can. The other thing that's important about that order here, if you remember from the mechanics section, soaking that Shaw orb that spawns as soon as the big ad dies, you'll want to use whichever DPS player is up next to soak that orb before they go down. So for example, if the big ad is about to die and I know I'm next up to go do my trial, I'm going to stand directly inside the hitbox of the large ad so that as soon as it dies, I instantly soak up that Shaw orb. Then I will go click on my little gold orb to send me down to my trial phase. This makes it so that nobody is gaining unnecessary amounts of corruption because, again, it gives 25 corruption each time one of those orbs gets soaked. So your tanks don't have to take any extra soaks. Your healers don't have to take anything. Your DPS aren't losing damage by taking additional stacks. This makes it as easy as possible to handle the additional corruption from each of those orbs without any downsides. Healers, basically the exact same concept. You want your healers to go down and complete their trial as quickly as you can. However, there's no repercussions for your healers completing their trial. It doesn't spawn an ad upstairs or anything like that. So what you'll want to do is just have one healer go down almost immediately. And as soon as that healer is down and completed and gets that bonus healing coming back upstairs, you just send your next healer and then they never go again. So for both DPS players and healers, assuming the fight itself plays out correctly, they will never go down more than once. Tanks, on the other hand, you guys are going to be doing your trial very frequently because your role after all your DPS and healers have soaked one orb and completed their trial, the rest of the fight, the 2 tanks will be taking care of soaking that Shaw orb, gaining that 25 corruption, and then going downstairs completing their trial to cleanse themselves. And of course, you're also taunt swapping off of the main boss every 3 or 4 stacks. So the cadence for tanks is basically get 3 or 4 stacks from the boss, soak a Shaw orb, go downstairs, complete your trial, come back up, repeat as you guys kind of flip-flop positions. So most of the time, you're always going to have one tank doing the trial and one tank upstairs, constantly soaking the orbs for one another and then swapping places. Once you have all of your trials completed, everyone's got their damage buff, and you understand kind of how to manage your corruption, the fight itself is very straightforward. If an ad spawns, kill it instantly. The faster it dies, the better. Make sure you soak those Shaw corrupted orbs as quickly as possible to prevent the pulse of raid damage. And then really the fight has nothing else going on. You dodge like one beam, right? You move a tiny bit and then you'll lust at 40% or so to burn the boss before it kills you. Raid cooldowns, you're going to want to stagger from about 40% on as that icy touch damage continues to ramp up. Bloodlust helps a lot here, but I would be stacked up, use things like barriers, AMs, personal cooldowns for kind of like the last 60 seconds of the fight. Just chain one cooldown after another because that's the only fight that gets genuinely difficult in more of a healing check. But also the more damage you deal, the less that soft enrage does to you. So more damage is also more better. Who would have thought? So we'll wrap this thing up with a couple of pro tips. 1, all of the ads are stunnable, CCable, grippable, interruptible. Don't let them cast basically ever. They also have extremely low health, so there is no reason for them to be alive any longer than like 5 seconds. Every time one spawns, it should be instant swap, kill it immediately, then go back onto the boss. If you have gone down, completed your trial, and find yourself somehow back above 75 corruption, you are doing reduced damage to the boss. And depending on how much HP the boss has left, you may want to go downstairs and do another trial. But don't forget that each time you complete a trial as a DPS, it does spawn a large ad. On top of the fact that every 10% health the boss loses, beginning at 50% and below, will also spawn a large ad. So try not to do that because having multiple ads out plus the boss can get a little bit overwhelming. But if you absolutely have to, it's better than doing literally no damage, because if you're sitting at 100% corruption or 100 corruption energy, you're going to need to do one of those trials to drop yourself back down to 0. When done correctly, as far as corruption management goes, this boss mechanically is not very hard. What it turns into more is the last 1 to 2 minutes of the fight is a DPS and healing check. So Enrage can get tight if you mismanage your corruption and aren't doing full damage to the boss at all times. But otherwise, mechanically, very simple fight. Another one to add to the list for those week 1 clears. Hopefully this guide helped. Looking forward to getting the next one out to you all as soon as possible. As a reminder, did I forget something? Did I mess something up? You just want to make fun of me? Leave it in the comments down below. Please help me get better every single day, and I will see you all in the next one.